Pro from Pretoria. Is everything all right? People talk, say things.
Hello?
Why didn't you tell me it was out of order? I suppose you think that's funny.
I'm not allowed out the front door.
Who says you weren't?
Them.
Who?
Them.
It was terrible out there. I could hear breathing.
We told you.
Are you worried about the man?
They hate us. That's the truth. They want to kill and torture every one of us. You can see it in their eyes.
Come now, Frederick. Do you dream about unholy things?
I really don't like what's going on here. There's something wrong, and that's a fact.
Wait. What did you dream last night? This manifestation of evil. You must be delivered from evil.
Kid, mind if I take a swig of milk?
Knock yourself out.
Ulcers. All I do these days is drink fucking milk.
My heart bleeds.
Yeah, well, so do my ulcers, you punk bastard. What the goddamn hell's this about? There's easier ways to commit suicide, you
There's
know.
a dead man downstairs who found a harder way.
Louis? If you killed Louis, so help me.
Campagna's okay. He'll have a headache to make a hangover seem like Christmas, but he's okay. Fatso, too.
Then who?
A blonde guy, I don't know his name, but I've seen him around.
Have you?
Last time was at Bayfront Park when you sent him to help kill Cermak. Time before that, I saw him running down Randolph Street when Capone sent him to kill Jake Lingle. And tonight, you sent him to kill Nate Heller. But he didn't quite get the job done, did he?
You're wrong on that last count, kid. Dead wrong.
Then you sent that son of a bitch to Florida just to catch some sun?
I didn't say I didn't send him to Florida. What I do say is I didn't send him to kill you.
He pushed me off a skyride tower tonight, Frank. And you know I really don't like heights. I should be a twisted sack of bones and meat on a morgue tray about now, but somehow I'm not. I'm here. He's dead, and so are you. So are you, Nitty. I wish to Christ Lang had killed you that afternoon. I wish to Christ I didn't make them call an ambulance for you.
Heller, I didn't send him. I didn't even know the bastard was in town. He doesn't work for me.
He doesn't work for anybody now.
Something you aren't at all aware of. Why am I not already dead?
The silenced automatic in my hand raised to aim itself at his forehead.
You are dead. Fuck you.
Wait, just wait. Lower that goddamn thing, will you? Just hear me out. I didn't say he never done work for me. He's a guy Johnny Torrio recommended to Al back on the Lingle deal. I used him later myself. Used him now and then on ticklish matters.
Oh, is that what I am? A ticklish matter?
Kid, I know how you feel. I know the kind of emotions you got running wild in you. I know all there is to know about revenge. You could ask 10% Tony if he wasn't in hell. But I didn't hire a contract on you. I swear by all that's holy.
And I'm supposed to believe that because of all the Catholic shit on the walls? Who sent him then, Frank?
I don't know the answer to that. Not for sure. But I can figure it out, and so can you, if you try.
I was getting confused, starting to wonder what the hell I was doing.
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course the perhaps never to be defined existential Mr. Rogers. And before I start, I'm Robert Meyer Burnett. I'm, of course, Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is, of course, Robservations episode number 1046. Before I start, though, I want to point out that one of the only reasons that I feel that I can review things, that I can talk shit about things, or embrace things that I love, is because I, too, make things for people to judge. So I feel like there's a balance there. I don't know if I could talk mad shit the way I talk mad shit on the internet about other people's work if I wasn't doing my own that I'm putting out there to be judged. And as you can see, the audio drama True Noir that I'm very proud of, that was written, of course, by Mystery Writers of America, Grandmaster. It's 4.5 hours long. You can go get it now at truenoir.co. It's star-studded. It stars Michael Rosenbaum, a former Lex Luthor himself, in the title role. People like David Strathairn's in it, Katie Sackhoff is in it, Bill Sadler's in it, Vincent Pastore from The Sopranos is in it. It's got a star-studded cast. Check it out. And our movie, White Devils, we're going to have an online world premiere. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but it's trying something new. Movie I produced. We're going to do that on August 9th. So there you go. There I've said my piece. So I went with Can't Be a Crew. And we saw James Gunn's Superman tonight. Obviously, it's an incredibly... it's a movie that I've been very interested in on a number of levels. It's not just... I'm a huge fan of James Gunn. I was lucky enough to work with him about 25 years ago on a movie called The Specials that he wrote, that Craig Mazin directed. I was a producer on that. I left the company from the time it shot, so I was demoted from being full producer to just an associate producer. But hey, my credit's there. But I love working with James very much. Big fan of his all the way back to The Specials. Check it out. If you want to see a movie about the 7th greatest superhero team in the world made for $1 million, go check out The Specials. But of course, after what happened with DC, with the previous DC movies, I mean, it was very interesting that a lot of people know that I worked on Superman Returns. I was the documentarian, the on-set documentarian. So I worked on Superman Returns for 2 years. I was on set in Australia every day of production. And I made a 3-hour documentary that you can see on the Blu-ray on the making of that film. So I saw how a Superman movie got made from soup to nuts, which is interesting. And that came on the heels of me doing documentary work on X-Men and X2. Both of those documentaries, all that work you can find on Blu-ray and some of the 4K discs. Superman Returns is not on 4K. So as a documentarian and as a lifelong fan, I've had previous connections to superhero films. One of the things that we live in a very interesting time in genre cinema. I'm a huge fan, I have been my entire life, of science fiction, fantasy, and horror films, and everything that surrounds it. I love science fiction, horror, and fantasy novels. I have been reading comic books for more than 50 years. I have been steeped in all of this material since I was a little kid. I got really serious about it, at least as I remember it, when I was 5. A lot of confluence of events happened, but when I was 5, started watching Star Trek, started watching The Twilight Zone, started watching Batman, saw movies like Planet of the Apes for the first time, Byron Haskins' War of the Worlds. So all of this stuff that I love so much was ingrained in me in an early age. And I approached it like I was a student, really. Like I wanted to know everything about all of it. Who wrote it? You know, who directed it? Who starred in it? Why was it made? Where did it come from? I had this insatiable, unquenchable thirst for knowledge about all of these flights of fancy, the things that I love. You can see I'm surrounded by a lot of it here. And I was privileged to live through a time where I saw Star Wars opening weekend. I saw Superman the movie. I saw Jaws in the theater on first run. So I actually watched the evolution of all of this pop culture that we love from early on. I went and saw, my mom took me to see Logan's Run. I was 9 years old on the second night it was playing in theaters at the John Dan Cinema. So I've been very into this stuff my whole life. And I feel the need to state all of this because I've been thinking about all of it for so long. And I was lucky to live through a time when I got to see Superman the movie, the first big superhero film. That's where I got the word verisimilitude, because I saw it famously in behind-the-scenes footage of when the movie was getting made. There was that one image where it had Superman with the word verisimilitude underneath it that was in the production offices of Superman, Richard Donner's Superman. And that's where I first heard that word and read about it, and I was obsessed by it. The idea of creating on screen, making something, give it the quality of feeling real. And that idea is, and by the way, there's lots of different kinds of verisimilitude. And I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with it when it came to horror films, science fiction films. It's been something that I've been obsessed by my whole life. When I was able to make films of my own and work on projects, verisimilitude has always been important to me. And why is that? Well, because movies, especially, they're all made up. When you point a camera at something, for the most part, in the grand age of movies that were made, the post-sound era, most of those were shot because they needed controlled environments on sound stages, and then they were able to move out and go out into the real world and shoot things. But in order to create believability, in order to create verisimilitude, you know, if what's really, really interesting is if say you're shooting in a real location, say you're shooting outside or inside, but if you leave a camera up and you say you use a 50 millimeter lens and you just shoot like two people sitting at a table, no editing, it's just a single shot, you will not, surprisingly enough, create verisimilitude. It will look phony because you're not using the language of cinema. So if you just set up a camera and have people talk, you might have the most realistic location, but in terms of cinema, it won't work. What you have to do is everything within a frame, everything has to be perfect. I mean, varying degrees of perfect, in order to make the audience believe. And this is true of every single frame in a movie. You know, you don't get a pass. If you're watching a scene, say a conversation between two people sitting at a table at a restaurant, and say you've got 6 pieces of coverage, you know, you've got mediums, and then you got close-ups, and you got a 50-50 or something. If one of those shots doesn't look real, or if a background actor doesn't pass by, it could could shatter the whole illusion. So every single frame of a movie has to appear real, even though it's all made up, unless you're shooting a documentary of an actual event happening. But narrative film, it's all fake. Everything's fake. And I mean, yeah, you can shoot in a real location, but where you're shooting is a controlled environment, and everything in it is it's make-believe. Now, one of the interesting things is, say you are adapting a comic book story for the world. Richard Donner was facing a daunting task because before 1978's Superman, superheroes portrayed on the big screen, first of all, the technology wasn't there, especially if, you know, men were supposed to fly. I think, believe it or not, before Superman, there's some of the most convincing flying stuff, a lot of unconvincing flying stuff too, but was in The Adventures of Captain Marvel, the serial from, I think it was from the 40s, with Shazam, Captain Marvel. A lot of people forget that there was a black and white serial. It's really, really good if you haven't seen it and you're able to get in the right mindset. But you had Kirk Allan playing Superman. Then you had George Reeves playing Superman in The Adventures of Superman on television. You know, he would jump out a window and fly. But what Richard Donner wanted to do, and that's why verisimilitude was so important, and the ad line of the movie was, "You'll believe a man can fly." And what he was trying to do was give us a credible, real world. They did a little bit of location shooting in New York City. New York City was doubling for Metropolis. And what Richard Donner wanted to do was say, okay, here's our real world. You know, you're not watching a movie serial, you're not watching a TV show. This is the real world, and we're going to give you the last son of Krypton, and we're going to make you believe that a character like Superman could exist in our world. And that was the key. How do you take a comic book character who can do all these outlandish things and put him outside everyone's front door and make you believe that that character exists now here in the real world? Will you believe a man can fly? How do people on the street react to Superman? You know, and that's what the task was. Now, the really interesting thing is Superman the movie begins on Krypton, and it shows you all this stuff. It shows you the 3 outlaws from Krypton. You've got General Zod, Ursa, and Non. You have the whole Kryptonian Council. You see this amazing society of super science, crystalline, gigantic buildings, massive in scale. And then you see the civilization die. But what was really interesting is there's different ways to portray a civilization, an advanced alien civilization. For instance, Jor-El in the comics, you know, he kind of had this funky, you know, Art Deco outfit with green and a sun on the chest and all that. They had to figure out ways to make you, they couldn't do that because if they had recreated Jor-El from the comics exactly, that verisimilitude would have been very hard to keep and show you Krypton if it looked like that. How do you make that transition from that Krypton that was comic accurate to our real world? The color palette alone would, I mean, we figured it out later, like you see Zack Snyder's Krypton, and the transition between that Krypton and our real world is more believable because of the effects technology and what you're able to do and the way you can make things look. But in 1978, they opted to show you a very different Krypton than was in the comics. But it worked in terms of the verisimilitude. It set up a world. And remember, that was really the first, I mean, you saw flashbacks to the great city metropolis, you heard a voiceover, but then the first scenes were on this incredible planet of Krypton. And you had to buy into it. It made you buy into it. And what's really interesting about Superman the movie is it eases you start out with the alien planet, but it's so somber. First of all, you see these Kryptonians, they're guilty, they're sent off in the Phantom Zone, and you're like, whoa, man, that is some hardcore stuff going down. There's a lot of fantasy elements to it, the rotating glass of the Phantom Zone and all that. So there's a seriousness to it that immediately makes you stand up and go, okay. And then when you finally descend, when you meet Ma and Pa Kent, and Kal-El crashes to Earth, and you see him as a baby, it's very much like you're outdoors, you're in Kansas, you're in Smallville, you're wherever you are, and you believe it. Now there's a little bit of dodgy effects when you see Clark running by the train and all that, but at the time, you bought into it because the movie made you buy into it. You believed. And then after Glenn Ford dies, Pa Kent dies, and there's the great John Williams score helps as well. That sweeping orchestral score a year after Star Wars came out, it is a score that is mythic and has an importance to it, and it makes you believe. And that shot where Superman is looking out at his future that he doesn't know what it is with Ma Kent, and the camera pulls around, and you're in that giant like wheat field in Alberta, Canada, even though it's supposed to be America, and with the French horns playing, and it gets big, and it's a big wide shot. You're like, oh my God, this is American mythology 101. And there is a tone established in the first 30 minutes of Superman the movie that has carried through in some way, shape, or form with every iteration of any on-screen Superman we have seen since then. There is that reality, that, call it, and the portrayal of Superman, there was a messianic quality to Superman. He is set, somehow he has one foot in our world, whether it was the Superboy TV series, whether it was Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, whether it was Smallville, whether it was Zack Snyder's Superman movies. It's funny because the Justice League version of Justice League kind of moves a little bit away from that, whereas Zack Snyder's Justice League pulls it back. But the character of Superman from 1978 up until 2025 has always been, let's call it the messianic era of Superman, where there was a mythical, godlike quality to the character. Even when Tyler Hoechlin played him, it was still, he's a father, he's a husband to Lois. There is very much, he has one foot in the world of the real, even though, sure, the CW shows, they could veer off and be more comic booky. Up until now, everything was, to a certain extent, one way or another, had a realistic bent to it. Smallville, definitely. So there is an expectation, obviously the Zack Snyder versions of Superman in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and his version of Justice League, that Superman is sort of the messianic version to the nth degree. And there's a very much a Wagnerian quality, an operatic quality to what Zack Snyder was doing. But again, these even Doomsday showing up and the way things were portrayed, it was mythic and operatic, but it still was very much of a certain tone. And Christopher Nolan did the same thing when he did the Dark Knight trilogy. Very much of the real world. Tim Burton's Batman movie took place in an Anton First designed fantasy land that had no bearing on the real world. And Joel Schumacher's Batman movie certainly didn't either. Physics was not the same. Those took place in their own hermetically sealed worlds, but those were not for everybody. There was always still an element, as dark as Tim Burton's Batman movies were. There was a certain element you could trace back to the Batman series of the 60s, the Burt Ward and Adam West series. A little bit. Just a little bit. But with Superman, it's kind of... Now, I had an experience, and I was thinking about this driving home tonight from the movie. I had an experience where obviously one of my great loves is the Star Trek franchise. And I took the Star Trek franchise very seriously. And I had a very big expectation. And from 1966 to 2005, Star Trek was a certain way. It was presented a certain way, and in a way, it kind of made you believe little bit of different tones and things like that. But it had its own universe, and it had a sort of. I found it very important, and I always loved Star Trek. In 2009, that was all gone. That was taken away. And Star Trek was made, it was, in a way, it's not that it was dumbed down, it was just made more accessible, it was made more normal. Kirk rides a motorcycle. The Enterprise is built on the ground, so you can see welders making it. And I get that, but I totally rejected that approach to the Star Trek universe. A lot of people love Star Trek 09. I am not one of those people. The characters don't act like they're supposed to act. They act like they're on Earth today. It's all very contemporary, so modern audiences can, bro down with everybody. Just like Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the Vegas show version of Star Trek. It also has the same problem that Star Trek 09 has, and I find it very difficult to watch. The character of Spock is completely not understood. He's written like he's some neurodivergent high school kid to make him more accessible. Oh, and he's got a learning disability. Just ridiculous. I can't stand it. Which brings me to James Gunn's Superman. And I'm going to start out by saying James Gunn's Superman is the Star Trek 09 version. What Star Trek 09 was to original Star Trek, to the Star Trek I loved, James Gunn's Superman is to the messianic portrayal of Superman with his legs firmly in the quote-unquote real world. It is the antithesis of everything Zack Snyder's Superman is doing. As a matter of fact, they're on opposite ends of the planet, which is why you're going to see, I can only imagine some of this seething hatred that is going to come James Gunn's way after a lot of these people see, because it is a completely different flavor, not just of Superman, but of any Superman that has been previously portrayed on screen in live action. And when people say it's like Superman the animated series, it's like the comic books. Now that said, I'm already hearing from a lot of people. I watched people like Jeremy Johns and Dan Murrell and Snarky J and a lot of other people online whose reviews I usually, they're my go-to reviewers. There's people that really, really like things, and I'm usually in agreement with them, that we're not fans of James Gunn's movie. And I found it interesting until I saw it. Now, it's hard to explain this because a lot of people will just say, oh, it's a James Gunn movie. But now the thing about James Gunn is, if you think about, he's made Slither, he's made Super, and he's very good at creating his own James Gunn reality, which is its own verisimilitude, and making us believe in it. Guardians of the Galaxy is a primary example. Sure, you had the MCU existing, but Guardians of the Galaxy, people don't remember how much of a big swing it was. It was like, wait, what? But he made you believe. But you knew going in, you hadn't seen Guardians before. So he had the ability to do whatever he wanted. He could use the pop music. He could, over the opening credits, show Star-Lord dancing in to get that artifact. He had a freedom to set up a reality that you would buy into. James Gunn has done something that I did not realize how it would affect me. How would I feel about this? I thought he'll bring whimsy into it. But at first, it had none. When I say none. The way that you've been getting into the character of Superman since Richard Donner and even before, none of that is in James Gunn's Superman, which is odd to say because you're still seeing Metropolis, you're still seeing Superman, Lex Luthor, and all this stuff happening. But the world and the way it's presented, the reality, the verisimilitude of James Gunn's Superman is unto itself. Which is, I think, a lot of people, like when I was watching, my experience was I had an expectation because I've been watching Superman my whole life. And it's not that my expectations were subverted. James Gunn is doing something entirely different. I know it's kind of weird to say because it's about Superman, but it's a totally different mindset. And when I was watching this movie tonight, I had a hard time getting into it because it just literally drops you in to this world and you have to look as you go. Whereas Richard Donner's Superman slowly builds the world up. And it's interesting because I love Superman, the 1978 Superman, but it has a huge tonal issue between Superman's story and what's going on with Lex Luthor, which is a borderline slapstick comedy at certain points, even though I love it. But one of my favorite scenes in any superhero movie is when Lois Lane interviews Superman in Richard Donner's Superman the movie on her roof, because it's like a great scene out of a screwball comedy from the 1940s. James Gunn's Superman requires of the audience that you need to jettison everything you've ever thought, every expectation you might have of what a Superman movie is supposed to be, because the universe that it takes place in is totally different. It's totally different. It's a totally different universe. And so the movie is asking you, and there are going to be people that just go with it and people that aren't. But for me, who've had an attachment to a certain way Superman's been portrayed in films, and what I like the reality of it. I like X-Men beginning at Auschwitz. I like what Sam Raimi did with Superman. I love the Infinity Saga, how they built up to the high fantasy. You started out with Iron Man, one guy, they made you believe in flying armor. By the time you get to Infinity War and Endgame, you've got Corvus Glaive, you've got Thanos, you got the Guardians, you got all kinds of crazy shit. You got a Forge in a Star where they're going to make Stormbreaker. I mean, it's epic fantasy, but they took you there incrementally. They brought you along and made you believe. James Gunn's Superman does what the Marvel Cinematic Universe took 23 movies to do. It does it in the first 15 minutes of this movie. And a lot of people are not going to dig that. They're not going to dig it. And for me, I'm going to be honest, it took me a while because I had expectations. It took me a while. And it was kind of like, in a way, it was kind of like when I saw How to Train Your Dragon. I just didn't think the live action How to Train Your Dragon worked. And then I got about 20 minutes in, we saw it at CinemaCon, and then somehow it clicked into place. Strangely, I'd never had that happen to me before, but it happened to me a second time tonight, where I won't give you a spoiler, but the movie was going along, and I'm following it, and then suddenly, click, I'm like, oh, it all snapped into place, and suddenly I was locked in on this movie. I now understood where I was, what was happening, and I started to fucking love it. At first, I was trepidatious. I was trying to figure out, like, what are you showing to me? You know, and what you're showing to me is everything. It's crazy. It's crazy. And you have to train yourself to go along with James Gunn. And it's different. On the surface, it seems like he's doing what he did in Suicide Squad and what he did on Peacemaker and what he did in Guardians. But this is a different thing, because what he's doing is he's taking a previous portrayal of a character that's been portrayed a certain way, and he's asking an audience that has half a century of Superman that they've been watching and they've got in their heads. He's asking you to forget that, and I'm going to take you somewhere new. This is going to be the biggest, I think, point, and I'm watching these reviewers who aren't digging the movie. They're trying to figure out, because they're still locked in on what they think a Superman movie is supposed to be, and they're trying to make sense of it, because James Gunn is not interested in any of that. He's interested, like he said, Guardians of the Galaxy was his ode to cinema, and this movie is his ode to comic books. And I'm not even saying that you have to have read comic books to understand this, nor do you have to have seen the Superman animated series to understand this. No, but you do need to, you have to meet the movie at the place that it's taking you. You have to turn yourself over to the world that it's portraying, because for 300 years there's been metahumans on Earth. They are everyday occurrences. There's, in fact, one of my favorite things that happened in this movie, I'll tell you, it's the scene. It's from the very first picture we ever saw of David Cornsweet as Superman. You see that there's some kind of energy, something happening outside the window in the sky. That what was going on there was genius. In the movie, it was genius. I'm like, that's because that whole thing is world building in a very interesting way, and I was totally delighted by it. So I really loved James Gunn's Superman. I also know it's going to be incredibly divisive on every level, because there's going to be people that totally, as I said, it's 180 degrees away from what Zack Snyder was doing. As a matter of fact, it's varying degrees away of what anybody is doing. But I'll tell you, as the movie went on, its spell captured me. And there are things in it that really surprised me. There was portrayals of Luthor's evilness that I was taken aback by. There's a lot of surprising things in it. But I will say this, the movie is wildly entertaining. I was wildly entertained by it. A lot of people won't be. A lot of people will never be able to get past what James Gunn is trying to do. And that's no criticism of them. It's just that that's not what they want. You know, that's not what they're used to. It's going to be really difficult for people to allow themselves to be enveloped by the movie and about the world that he's presenting, because there is not real world. It is a fantasy from top to bottom. And you need to buy into it. And it's going to be something, I would imagine, look, the audience, I think a lot of the audience bought into it. They loved it. You know, I didn't get to talk to anybody who didn't love it at the screening, but I'd be very curious. I've seen people's reviews. I have friends that I know that they didn't like it at all. And I know why. I know why. I think I tried to just describe to you why people don't like it. First of all, the cast is uniformly great. They're so entertaining. Rachel Brosnahan and David Cornsweet are incredible. He's great as Superman. She's great as Lois Lane. Nicholas Hoult is great as Lex. I thought all the characters, even I thought Nathan Fillion was going to grate on my nerves. He does, but in a good way. The whole Justice Gang, everybody, I thought impeccable cast. And the plot unfolded. You know, there were elements we've seen elsewhere. You know, and I thoroughly enjoyed everything. Krypto works, and I will say Krypto's involvement in the movie has an incredible payoff. An incredible payoff that I did not see coming at all. And which I thought was great, and the audience loved it. And I have to say that I thought the movie was really, really, really fun, really terrific. I'll tell you, if I had seen this movie when I saw Superman the movie, I was 11. If I was between 8 to 11 years old and I saw this movie at that age, it would have been like mainlining Tony Montana levels of blow. This movie would have been it would have blown my mind. But it is a lot to take in, and I think it's if your expectations are that you're going to get, you have to take anything you've ever thought that a Superman movie was, you gotta look at it in a totally different way, and that's kind of, I mean, look, there's some huge, big, fantastical fantasy ideas that are very much removed from reality. It's very much a total fantasy film. My biggest criticism, this is going to be a funny thing to say, this movie is too short. It was very apparent watching this movie that they cut a lot out of it. And what did they cut out? They cut out all the character moments. There's a big supporting cast. Like, I could have watched this movie. This movie could have easily been a half an hour longer, and I would love to have spent a lot more time. Wendell Pierce as Perry White is completely, I'm sure he had a lot more scenes that were cut out. He's barely in the movie. I really missed that. I would like to have seen more scenes at the Daily Planet, and I'm sure they were there, because all of those actors are great. Jimmy Olsen gets a little moment where the movie's on him for a moment, which is great. And you can tell that there was probably a lot more characters in this, but to err on the side of caution, they made this movie a tight 2 hours. And let me tell you, I thought the movie was 90 minutes. When it was over, I'm like, wait, what? I mean, it moves like a rocket, like a freight train, which is another problem. I think a problem for the movie. I think if it had a little bit more time to breathe, I mean, it goes so fast that if it allowed you to sink into this world and give it a little bit more time, and the way they would have done that is to allow the scenes with our characters to breathe a little bit more. I would love to have had more time to hang out with these people just because I like them. But it's very much, I mean, they didn't want to get, oh, the movie's too long, it's almost 3 hours. No. I absolutely can see that this movie was, I would love to see James Gunn do a director's cut of this. Maybe they will, depending on how well this does. Maybe they'll give you an extended version, because I would very much like to see what he does with all these characters, because I loved all of them. And, you know, you think they're, and of course, I wanted to see more of the Justice Gang. Mr. Terrific is terrific. One of my favorite actors who's also on For All Mankind. He was great. And all of the little, I mean, all the other roles amount to basically cameo roles, which is kind of a shame. But everybody he picked, I wasn't too sure about his choices that James Gunn was making with Ma and Pa Kent, because again, that's the funny thing. Like, they were probably the most realistic in terms of parents you'd meet, whereas Ma and Pa Kent, the way we've seen them, they're almost like angelic figures. But Pruitt Taylor Vince, I've always been fascinated with him as an actor. I mean, he's shown up in crazy things, like in Jacob's Ladder as a shell-shocked soldier in Vietnam, and he was like in an X-Files episode, and it was, I really like, and people are going to find that off-putting at first, because it's so different. But I found this movie to be absolutely enchanting in a way that I wasn't expecting. This movie worked on, like, I thought I was going to get whimsy. I talked about comparing it to things like Pacific Rim or Amelie or Japanese anime, which, yeah, I mean, I really love this movie. But a lot of people, I think, are going to have a hard time with it. You can already see in a lot of these reviewers, I think they're coping with because they wanted a kind of Superman movie that they've already seen before. And it's interesting because people are trying to come to grips with it, and they're like, well, it's too James Gunn, or it's not James Gunn enough, and I totally get it. And we're going to hear all of that discourse. And it's going to be interesting to watch it play out over the course of the next week, because there's going to be all kinds of things. And I would imagine all kinds of things said about this movie. I would imagine it's going to be incredibly divisive, like I said, in fan circles. Because I already know people that really dislike this movie. And I was like, it wasn't what I expected, something that was full-on fantasy comic book, but I wasn't quite expecting how this movie works and what it did and on what levels it was working on. But James Gunn went for something totally unique. He was setting up a universe that can have many different tones in it, because this movie has many different tones. There's a lot of possibilities here, and I just wish this movie were a half an hour longer. And I wanted to spend a lot more time with all of these secondary characters, because they're great. And that's not what the movie was about. And I'm sure they erred on the side of caution and cut it down and make it shorter. But that's kind of how by the way, I'm trying to stay away from, this is a non-spoiler review. You know, I'm not getting into the plot here, because no one's seen the movie as I'm reviewing it now. But there's a lot of wild stuff. There's a lot of wild swings. There's things that you've never seen in this movie. The mythology, I mean, kryptonite, how it works, very interesting. A lot of stuff that's surprising. You know, the engineer from the Authority is in this. They didn't mention anything about the Authority. I'm wondering, I mean, they've talked about the Authority was going to be a movie that they were going to... I'm sure a lot more of that stuff was in the film. They cut it all out. They stripped it down and they made this movie. It goes like a rocket. They wanted to keep the pace up. They wanted to leave people breathless, because you're watching and by the time it's over, you're like, wait, what? There are two brief post-credit scenes. I mean, one is, I wouldn't even call it a post-credit scene. It's a post-credit shot. And then there's a brief scene that was probably from within the movie that they decided they wanted to tag it on the end. I'm sure it was in the movie at some point, and it just moved it around. But I implore everybody at Warner Brothers, please let James Gunn do, or do it like they might just say there isn't one, but there clearly is. And I would love to see, maybe they'll be included as deleted scenes on a 4K release, but I would love to see an extended cut of this movie, the same way we got the extended cut of the Lord of the Rings movies. But it's all going to be depending on how the movie does. I thought it was a wildly entertaining 2 hours. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm seeing it again on Thursday. And I'm going to be really interested to hear what people think about this movie. I don't think there's going to be much middle ground. I think people are either going to really, really love it, or they're not going to like it very much at all. And I think that's only because... the thing is, it's so earnest, and you love the characters so much, and I think that's the most important thing. You love Superman. You love everybody in this movie, except Lex Luthor, but you love to hate him. And everybody's clearly having a great time. But again, I just wished I would have watched 2.5 hours of getting to learn about all of these interesting, and I don't think it would have affected the pacing, because there's so many secondary characters that it would have just been fun to bop around in between them and get to know them a little bit more. That's my biggest criticism of the movie. And, yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on the film, and I think it's strange. It's like I was, like, chastising myself as I'm driving home. I'm like, I was thinking about the fact that I get it. If I was a Zack Snyder bro and I went and saw this movie, it would be like what it felt like for me as a Star Trek fan to watch Star Trek 09. I wanted to punch myself in the face. There's going to be people that I would have made fun of them until I saw the movie. Now I completely understand where you're coming from. I totally get it, but this is something new. You don't often get in our climate. This is something new. This is not Marvel. This is not DC trying to make self-important serious movies. This is something unique to itself. And I'll tell you one thing. We're going to get a lot of different kinds of movies in this universe. I hope this universe works out, because this is different. This is not just DC doing Marvel. This is something very different. And the Gods and Monsters era of DC Studios is open for business. And I think it's very exciting. And I'm certainly excited to experience it. So let's see if anybody, I don't know how many of you, let's see if anybody sent in any chats or things. I'll see what anybody's saying. Let me get up here and go. Okay. Darren says, first, I'm taking my 10-year-old son on Friday. Stoked. I think he's going to like it. Draven Cold says, the third reboot this century. So sick of modern movies afraid of sincere vulnerability. Returns hardly ever undercut heart with humor. Hardly ever. That's true. But that's that's what I'm talking about. You're expecting a certain thing that you were getting from Superman movies. This is not that at all. So I don't know how long people are going to. It's going to be interesting to hear what people think. And by the way, it took me a while before I was able to meet this movie where it wanted me to meet it. My expectations were I had to get out of my own head. I had to get out of my own. Oh, but this is not what a Superman movie is like. I had to move that out because it isn't that. Tom Jr. Jackson says, hey, Rob, I'm on the train heading to D.C. from Illinois. We just left Cleveland. Hello, Cleveland. Just saying hi. I've been on the go since 11 a.m. Gonna sleep now. All right. Draven Cold says, Returns is still rated higher on Metacritic than both Man of Steel and Superman 2025. I'd say Bryan Singer is knee-slap laughing with Quentin Tarantino over in Israel, Rob. Well, Brian's not... He's not that kind of guy, but maybe. I mean, look, the thing about there's a lot of commentary on Superman Returns, as you've read, I'm sure. But Brian made the movie that he wanted to make, and he made his choices they were very specific choices, and Dan and Mike Doherty, who wrote the script, they were all working in tandem. And whether you appreciate his vision, I can tell you one thing: the work put into that film was enormous. And yeah. Tyler Fletcher says, I'm confused. Do you like the movie or not? I like the movie very much. I thought it was something new, and it put a big smile on my face, and I was wildly entertained by it. Wildly entertained by it. And there were times, man, there were times when it almost lost me. I will say the giant kaiju you see, where you see it almost lost me, and you'll see where that creature comes from. Almost you'll see. Darren says, thank you for making me more excited to see this with my son. I think you're going to dig it. I think your son's going to dig it. Darren says, when can we expect For All Mankind Season 5? I would imagine in the fall, October, November. I don't think they've announced it yet, so I'm not sure when it's coming. The Ill Yankee says, you think John Schnepp would have dug this flick? I think he would have loved it. I think John Schnepp would have loved this movie. I really do. Korsig sends in a super sticker, a $10 super sticker. Well, thank you. It's a thank you super sticker, so thank you for that. Luke Skywanker says, do you have any cool John Schnepp or James Gunn stories? I don't know about cool stories. Something that, like I mean, I've told the story before, but when I was in New York City in 2006, I was going to, or 2000, it might have been 2008. When did Quantum of Solace open? 2008. We were there. We saw Quantum of Solace there. I was there with my girlfriend, and she was the one really who introduced me to John Schnepp, I guess. And we were in Times Square. We didn't even know that John Schnepp was in New York City. He was working in New York City at the time. And we went into this Russian bar right off Times Square. And we got in there, and there was a fist fight. Like, it was crazy. And, nightlife in New York. And there in the middle of the bar was John Schnepp. Just in New York City. Like, we happened to roll into a bar where there was a crazy fight. And there was John Schnepp. It was wild. I mean, that was how... And then we hung out while we were in New York with him. But that was such a typical, I would imagine I could have been on a safari in the Kalahari Desert or something, and I would have run into John Schnepp because he was that kind of guy. But, yeah, I don't know if that's a cool story, but it's a true story. Kenneth Colton says Superman was pretty damn good. Next up is Fantastic Four, which I am very stoked for. I raise my glass of Knob Creek to you, good sir. Well, since I happen to have an old-fashioned right here, I raise my glass to you, Kenneth Colton. Scott Bartholomew says, It was badass. I loved the dunking Booth into this universe. And that's what it was, man. You got dunked in this universe. And this universe is great. Like it'll tickle your fancy if you want an explosion of the fantastic. It really will. Gandalf the Wolf said, I love Superman's wish for more Clark Kent, and the end credits use the theme music versus rock music. Yep. I don't want to ruin that for people, but it was very much a James Gunn choice. It was good stuff. Polly, the Latino slant is here, says, I love this film. But yes, I had to let go of past soups to fully appreciate Gunn's vision. Yeah. And you really do. You are going to go into this movie. You can't help it. You can hear me tell you, but it's kind of like The Matrix. You have to see it for yourself. And you're either going to be able to let go and go with it, or you're going to fight it the whole way. And I think the people that don't, and that's just to say, this is not a movie for everybody. This is going to be, like I said, it's going to be very divisive. It's going to be very much polarizing for people. But yeah. Jordan Saylor says Star Wars started with Episode 4. People got into that universe. But remember, when Star Wars came out, it wasn't Episode 4. It was just Star Wars. And Star Wars did something. You jumped into the universe with the opening scene, the blockade runner being trapped by the Star Destroyer, and then R2 and 3PO left. So you open with a bang, but then it eased you into the world. It eased you into Tatooine. We met Luke. He was a farm boy. It's like, oh, okay, they farm moisture. I get it. Then you met Ben Kenobi. And then Ben Kenobi, and then Uncle Owen and Aparu got killed. It led you along. So the first hour of Star Wars, it's in a way kind of a slow burn. And then you get to the Death Star. So this is not that. Adrian Perez says, do you think this movie is a blockbuster, yay or hit? I do. I think this movie is going to be, it's going to be really huge. I don't know if it's going to make $1 billion, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does, because I think people are going to go back. I think kids are going to love this movie. I think it's going to be a great family film, even though there's some things that are decidedly not for kids in this movie. But when I say that, pretty heady things. It's one act of violence, but it's presented in a tasteful way. But it's pretty hardcore. Siddharth Singh says, thoughts on where the DC universe goes from here? Exciting. Well, let me just say, there's a character in this movie who is going to a party somewhere, and I want to go to that party badly, and you'll know what I mean when you see the film. But yeah. That's all you need to know. And by the way, the less you know about the film, the better going in. Southern Missouri says, I've heard this movie is political. Do you think, A, do you think it is? And B, do you think that it will be divisive too? Well, first of all, part of this movie, look, the idea of Middle Eastern, or some countries in either Africa or the Middle East, they have been meddled with because of the current situation in the world. There's going to be a lot of people that draw parallels to things that are going on, especially in the Middle East with what's happening. But there are big differences in this. But people are going to definitely look. But it's situations. You could say it was about Iraq and Kuwait if you wanted to. But it's about. But when you find out what's actually going on. Look, a lot of people are going to read into this, but remember, this movie was written before October 7th of 2023. So there's going to be a lot of people that try and draw those parallels. But I thought it presented a very credible threat. Lex Luthor is a very bad guy doing some very dastardly deeds that made... And what he was doing was he was thinking very much three-dimensionally, and it's really interesting. And what Lex is doing, it's a part of, he's got his fingers in all of these pies. and I thought it was beyond politics. And look, the problem now is that everybody's looking for politics. Everyone's looking for identity politics. Everyone's looking for DEI. Everyone's looking to be. It's not like that. It's dealing with real politic, and it's not a movie that's designed to. It's about global game playing, put it that way, power brokering. And while there's going to be a lot of people that say one way or another, the only overtly political line in the movie, and it was pretty funny, it comes at the end of the movie, and somebody who we haven't seen in the movie yet says it. And I think it lays to rest what it's not political. It's not political. Hartford says, Rob, how would you describe the whimsy tone in this movie? Thank you for everything. Well, I mean, there is, you know what? The thing is, when you see, there's so much whimsical stuff in this movie that you just have to go with it. And what I mean to say is, there are physics in this movie that are pretty far out. There is something that's really interesting that the movie makes, and I have to see it again because I'm still not clear on this, but it makes a big supposition, or it tells us something. I'm not going to say what it is, but I was surprised by it, and it was left unresolved for me at the end of the movie. And it has to do with, I'll let you discover it on your own. But the whimsical tone, I mean, when you've got all this crazy super science and all this stuff that's happening, it's more of a fantasy than it is whimsical. There's just a lot of fantastical super science in the film. Just leave it at that, I think. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it all. Dan Vaughn says, what did Superman do for your Batman expectation? Well, I'll tell you. I mean, if they're making a Brave and the Bold movie with Batman and Damian Wayne, if Damian Wayne is going to be in the film, again, the Batman is going to be very, very different to any Batman we've seen on screen before. Very different. The Batman that everybody likes, the Christian Bale Batman and all that, it's going to be incredibly different than that. And I do want to see, because look, again, to give you a comic book example, when I was reading comics again in the early 80s, I read Batman and the Outsiders, which was a crazy, wacky book. Or I read Justice League International with Batman in it, and I would imagine Justice League International, I mean, honestly, Justice League International, Guy Gardner and all that comic is, I mean, it's overtly comedic. This movie isn't like jokes. There's a lot of funny stuff in this movie, by the way. But it's more along the lines of Justice League International. But yeah, my Batman expectation, I would love to see how Batman is dealt with in this universe. Because again, very different from any other previous iteration of Batman. Can't wait to see it. Scott Bartholomew says there was no woke BS at all in this movie, thank God. No, there was not. And again, this has a pretty diverse cast. You know, I think, and I would like to have seen more of every one of them. Again, Wendell Pierce is one of my favorite character actors, one of my favorite actors. And he's barely in the movie as Perry White. I would love to have seen a couple of scenes with Perry White and Lois and Clark at the Daily Planet. You know, and I'm sure, by the way, there was. And all that stuff they trimmed all that out, which I think was kind of a bummer. The Sax God says, what did you think of the mythology twist, the message? I'm trying to stay away from, I think, what you're referring to. I don't want to bring that up in this thing, but if you are referring to that thing, I was shocked by, from what I understand, that was true. I mean, if they made a really huge change to Superman mythology, and I'm like, whoa. But you know what? I kind of like if what we're talking about is the same thing and they said that, people, when they start thinking about it, are going to get pissed. But I was like, that's really interesting. Because remember, morality is different in space. If you're not from Earth, you have a different morality. Different things are going on if you are talking about what I'm talking about. Brian Walsh said Superman felt like the Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, DeMatteis, I never get his name right, but I love the guy. Justice League, yes. And I love the Justice League. It's the mid-'80s Justice League that Kevin Maguire drew. A lot of it was like that. Harsh Language Podcast says the commentary around this movie is insufferable. Totally agree, and guess what? Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride, a bumpy night, because we're just getting started. I can't imagine how the online discourse is going to go, because there's going to be people that are going to hate this movie. Siddharth Singh says, is it like watching a Justice League, a JLU cartoon? No, because a JLU cartoon is more, it has more of that original way of presenting Superman, I think. JMH says, I thought it was okay, but the characters felt one-dimensional to me. Definitely felt chopped down. Totally agree. That's my biggest criticism of this movie, is I would have watched it for a half an hour longer. I would love to have seen all those characters. I am sure that, and I understand why James Gunn did it. They had to hedge their bets. You know, they didn't want anyone to get bored. I'm sure the studio notes like, we don't need as much of these characters, and they're cut down to the bone. I had the same problem, by the way, with Superman Returns. The Superman Returns version that I like is 25 minutes longer. I mean, Cal Penn, his character doesn't even speak in the theatrical version of Superman Returns. I hope one day that maybe Warner Archive or maybe Arrow would put out Superman Returns and we can go back and Brian would restore the Friends and Family cut, because I think was a far better cut of the film, but because the henchmen had more to do. Jerry Mananen, all the way from Finland, says, I'm super excited after your review of the movie. Well, I mean, look, again, it's gonna require a different outlook. So again, I think it'll work for some people, but maybe not others. I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that is all going to work. I mean, it's just, the whole thing is wild to me. You know, I don't have any sense of it. But people seem to like it, and the audience that I was with seemed to really like it too. Well, listen, everybody, I just want to jump on this stream and talk about my thoughts on this movie before I figured why not. I mean, also because I just came out of the movie and I wanted to sort of tell you guys what I was thinking. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting this channel via super chats and tips. Thank you very much. And memberships. I think we're going to have a member call this week. And yeah, so it's great. Adrian Perez says, Man of Steel or Superman 2025? Ooh. Again, they're 180 degrees away from each other. Totally different. Totally different. I really like Man of Steel. But see, this is the thing. To compare and contrast Man of Steel and Superman 2025, I don't think they're even in this. Literally, they're not in the same universe. They are two diametrically opposed looks at the Superman character that work on completely different levels. They really do. And there are some people that are just going to prefer the Man of Steel approach. And I see that Christopher Nolan realistic approach. Look, I think that was one of the great things about his Batman trilogy, is that it's firmly set. This is as far away from Christopher Nolan as you can get, which means it's just about as far away from Zack Snyder as you can get. I mean, you know what this is? Like I said, Zack Snyder is fucking metal, man. Yeah. This is your favorite synth pop album from the 80s. I mean, if Zack Snyder's, Metallica, like Enter Sandman or something, this is. I was talking about Aha's second album, Scoundrel Days. That's the difference. I mean, Totally diametrically opposed. This Superman 2025 is, even though James Gunn probably wouldn't like that, he would probably tell me it's more of a pop punk thing or something. But yeah, it's wild. Wiley Todd says, I like the movie, but I had quite a few problems with it. Superman is my favorite superhero. The song choices were bad, in my opinion. You know, I didn't think they were bad. I thought maybe they were a little incongruous to the movie itself. So I can understand why you feel that way. Jordan Saylor said, Batman and the Outsiders with Metamorpho. Huh. Could Gunn be setting that group up? Well, I like Metamorpho quite a bit, and it's definitely in his wheelhouse. So yeah. Rick Alfonso says, hi again, Rob. Last year, both you and I disliked Deadpool and Wolverine's TVA story, but this year I completely agree. Superman was fantastic. Even the super science was explained and somehow acceptable. Oh, I loved all that super science. And I love Mr. Terrific might be the MVP of this movie. You know, Edie Gillespie. He was great. Mr. Terrific is great. I got to get that Hot Toy figure. He was great. Darth Plato says, is the movie metal? This movie is decidedly not metal. This movie is synth pop. It absolutely is. Great synth pop, but synth pop. L says it's a bad sign for the new DCU when its first film is received mixed. I disagree. I think that the mixed... Look, the reason that this movie has a mixed reaction is because people have never tasted this flavor before. And they don't know what to make of it. And there's going to be some people that reject it outright because they want a different kind. They want a flavor that's more familiar. And I understand that. But I'll tell you one thing. When this movie was over, I'm like, God damn, we have to wait another year to see another film from this universe. And I will also say that there's a reason why when this movie was over, I can't wait to see what happens next. Let's put it that way. Adrian Perez says, I wonder if we'll see Brainiac in the DC universe. Oh, now there's no allusions to that in this movie, but I could, if I was a betting man, and I am, I'd put $100 down on the fact that we would see Brainiac in a new movie. 100%. But yeah, in terms of this being mixed, I think this movie's going to do really well because it was wildly entertaining. I was wildly entertained by it. And when it was over, I had a huge smile on my face. I'm like, what did I just see? You know, it was like being at an EDM concert, you know, and you're hearing a DJ you'd never heard before, blew your mind. You know, that's kind of what it was. And I loved it. But it wasn't what I expected, and I certainly had to come to terms with it. I'm going to see it on Thursday with my girlfriend Elizabeth, and we'll see what happens and where that goes. I'll be very curious to hear what she thinks of it. But yeah. Hartford says, hi, Rob. Would you say what James Gunn is doing here is the result of the natural evolution of the comic book genre, or has he created a disruption in the genre? I think both. Look, I think the comic book film is a little moribund right now. The genre is a little... The Marvel Cinematic Universe is tired, and now they're going full-on gimmicky with Doctor Doom, because what else are they going to do? But this movie is not disruption because, as James Gunn said, this is his ode to comic books. This is mid-'80s DC. It's mid-'80s DC. Pre-crisis. When DC could still be goofy, and it could be serious, and you got all kinds of different things. But this is definitely James Gunn's pre-crisis DC love letter. So... yeah. Ash Ketchup said, hi, Rob, did you see Jeremy Johns and Dan Merle gave it a bad review? This seems really mixed. It is really mixed, and I totally understand why they didn't dig it. I reposted both of their reviews on X. I understand where they're coming from, but that's going to be the case for this movie. Because people want, I'm telling you, the way to explain it is people expect Superman to taste a certain way. this tastes different than any Superman anyone's tasted before, and they don't quite know. They don't know if they like it, or maybe they just outright don't like it. This is a new flavor. We're getting a new flavor, and this flavor has never been tasted before, and a lot of people are going to reject it. They're just not going to like it. I would have a feeling that this movie will grow in stature amongst people that dislike it. They'll try and watch it again, and they'll realize that they were put off the first time they saw it. It wouldn't surprise me if more people come around and like this movie more as it goes on. Scott Bartholomew says that the verbiage overlay in the introduction was badass. Oh, it was. Yeah, it was. And, yeah. And I have to tell you, the way that the Lex Luthor plot unfurled was very interesting. I thought it was very interesting. I was surprised by it, to be honest. I was very surprised by it. I thought it was really good. I mean, I really, he's a bad dude. He's just a bad dude. And I liked, there's so many interesting things. There's so many secondary characters. Again, I really wish this movie was another half an hour longer. I really do. I think it would have sustained it, because there's so much going on in this film. But yeah, I guess that's all I can say. I don't want to say anything more, because I'm trying to keep this spoiler free. So let's leave it there. And I'm going to be curious to hear what everyone thinks. I can't wait to hear what everybody thinks. I love reading all the different reviews and the things that people say. But for the most part, look, I will promise you this. You're going to go in and you're going to see something that you haven't really seen. It's very different from any comic book movie you've seen in a long time. It's certainly not like the MCU, and it's certainly not like what we got from the former incarnation of the DC universe. Very different. You're either going to dig it or not. I mean, but yeah, I don't know what to say. Nathan Trujillo says, I thought the movie was great. I was confused with some of the editing choices at the beginning. Yes. But was a banger when it hit its stride. I agree with that. And I think it's because the beginning, that's where they truncated a lot of the movie. You know, they were showing you these characters, they were introducing the relationships. Clearly there was a lot more at the Daily Planet, which I loved, because I loved all those characters. I wanted a lot more. And I think they just got rid of it. Kiora Rob Hosea says, how much did the trailers give away? Not much. The trailers gave away, they didn't give away much at all, believe it or not. I mean, the stuff happens in the movie, but it's surprising. Everything's surprising. You'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And the trailers, there's some things that were not in the trailers at all. You'd see a scene like, all I can say is that Superman punching that glass out when he's in that whole thing was like, wow. They didn't tell you what that was all about. That was really, really interesting. There's a big fantasy sci-fi component to this movie that I was unaware of just how much it was there, and I really enjoyed it. But on that note, everyone, I'm getting out. I really look forward to what you guys think and we're going to talk about it more on the John Campea show tomorrow. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for, digging, being part of the channel. It's been great. We've had a lot of fun. And, I think, this is, I'm going to be really fascinated by all the discourse surrounding this movie. And look, there's going to be a lot of Snyder cultists that are going to hate this, hate it, the same way that I hate Star Trek 09. But you know what? Now I understand. It's like the old Chris Rock comedy routine. I ain't saying she should have killed her, but I understand. Take that as you will. But yeah, the trailers didn't give anything away. Mugshots Art Studio sends in a super chat. Thank you, Mugshots Art Studio. I appreciate that. But I can't wait to hear what you all think. It is a really interesting time at the movies, and I'll be very curious. It's going to, again, if you don't like this movie, I totally understand. It is a lot. It's a lot of movie to take in, and it's a different flavor of Superman than we've ever got before on the screen, on the small screen or the large screen. So, we'll see. All right, everyone. Remember, Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And hey, if you haven't heard it yet, please support my own work and go to truenoir.co. No M on the end. truenoir.co and order the audio drama that I directed, edited, produced. True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak. It's 4.5 hours long, and you can get it in either 5.1. It sounds incredible on a home theater system, or get it in 2-channel stereo. I'd really appreciate the support. All right. I'll see you tomorrow on the John Campea Show, where we will be talking about this more, I'm sure. All right. Live long and prosper.